this feedback form. It only takes probably less than 5 minutes, but it gives us feedback on how to structure the class. And it'll be helpful for Brian and Ella because they'll be taking over next semester. So yeah, fill it out, please. But yeah, okay, how to create a good presentation, how to show off your high fidelity deliverables that you learned to make with your mockups with confidence. So start with background information, key descriptions. Let's say you're talking about presenting this brand that you're all making. Start with explaining what your brand is about, kind of explain like your intentions behind all your choices. So lay out the market demographic you are trying to appeal to. Let's say you're making a skincare brand and you wanted to appeal to Gen Z and millennial women. You can show your mood boards and your stylescapes that you kind of made that inspired the creative direction you ended up taking, and also including just your process and ideation behind everything you did is also really helpful. So these are examples, like this is like if you made a stylescape before creating your brand, this would be like a good thing to put in. And then present your designs. So when you're actually presenting them, you want to show really high quality, like final deliverables. And what we mean by that is you want to show mock-ups. So you made an app, you want to kind of put those screens in like a nice phone mock-up. If you made like a brand with packaging, and let's say you made a skincare brand, you want to show mock-ups of like the bottle or the tube or the cosmetics package you ended up using or the box. It's also really good to present your logo just by itself on black and white and different color combinations of the color palette you ended up coming up with. Maybe some fun graphics introducing your entire concept, and just multiple different assets basically in small, large, and standard sizes, and just to give it like breadth and variety. So this is an example. I took this from my portfolio. I made this project, wow, like 1 year ago. That's crazy, when we first went into quarantine. Right? Yeah. Yeah, so this was a basically concept made up agency that I wanted to create just because I really liked the word quixotic, which means like exceedingly idealistic, unrealistic, and impractical. And this was a little description I wrote. I wanted to brand a design studio that celebrated unrealistic and, you know, strive to create impossibly good work. And then blah, blah, blah. I explained my choices by saying like I wanted to contrast colorful, whimsical photos with brutalist style text. And then I move on to show like these little posters that I mocked up with the little clipboards. I lined them up and alternated. And I know I've said before, in like creating poster assets, it's really fun to make multiple just so that you can play around with like a series. So here I made like a few text posts and then alternated it with like pictures that I photoshopped and collaged together. This is another example. I created this campaign called Socially Distanced Pals, which again, I created when we went into quarantine. Can't believe it's been a year, but yeah. And then I said I wanted to call attention to the importance of social distancing, but wanted to do it in a fun and approachable way. So I used muted pastel tones that I made sure so that they wouldn't take away from the illustrations or the message behind the campaign. And then I featured the logo in like a color that I chose from the color palette. And then this was kind of like a fun little graphic to introduce the entire concept. So some backstory, this is like, these are the pals. These are based on like my friends in real life. And I just like created this little thing that says meet the pals. And then if you want to make like GIFs or like any other kinds of things, I just made this in Photoshop. I just compiled all these images together and made it like wrote like loop, basically. It was pretty easy. And then this is another example of like just a fun graphic to kind of introduce what your brand is about. So I just said a silly project to take our minds off the not so silly situation in one of the fonts that I chose for the brand or campaign. This is another thing I created. So just kind of imagine that all of this is like in a Behance folder or presentation and you're scrolling. And so like you see like the logo, you see like these little illustrations, you see this little description here. So it's kind of like a story and you want to tell like a compelling visual story. Then I moved on to show a bunch of mock-ups that I created to go with this campaign. So here, this is an example of posters. Here, the idea basically was to create a bunch of different products that people would use in the comfort of their own homes, like while they were isolated. So it would be personalized for them and like no one else, because you're not supposed to like share anything. You're not supposed to like spread germs. So everything would be like your very own. So yeah, the soap is to be enjoyed by Jack and no one else would be like an example. This was another example, just like personal ice cream, basically just like having fun with choosing the mockups you want, being intentional with the mockups you end up choosing, and just like trying to execute your brand across all of these different assets. This was like another example of an asset I thought would be fun to have. It's like a little brochure, ideally in this little concept of someone orders, say, ice cream or something, they get this little like insert brochure that comes with the packaging and you open it up, tells you like what the concept is about, the campaign's message and purpose, gives you like examples of all of these pals, just lays out the information in like a fun way. And then this was kind of like the hero image of the whole thing for me. I just wanted to make little cans with my friends. So that's what ended up happening. I created like these colors. And yeah. So I've also taken a few examples from different case studies on Behance. So this is an example of a brand case study. This is Fill and Guff. They kind of presented the logo here. This was a lot more clean, a lot more organized way of presenting. They named out the client, the location, agency, year, everything you needed to know. And then they presented the logo in these different ways. So the black logo against what I'm assuming is all of the other colors they chose in their color palette. And then they even chose to show the die lines of the packaging, which I think is a really cool way to present it. So these are like the physical files that they would send to the manufacturer. The manufacturer would mock it up into the actual like box, basically. And then they showed the tangible product in different forms, different close-ups and all that good stuff. So talk about your designs. I feel like your designs should speak for themselves, but they shouldn't be the only things like doing the work when you're actually presenting, because you need to explain your choices. You need to create a story behind it. So why did you choose these colors? Why this typeface? Why did you go in the direction of photography, or why did you go in the direction of illustration? Just make sure that you kind of have a story for everything. You have a reason for everything, because people love seeing a lot of intentionality and thought in your choices, and it just kind of makes it seem like you really know what you're doing, know what you're talking about. And describe your design. So just going back to the idea of storytelling, paint a narrative around everything that you want. Paint a narrative around your concept, focus on your customer profiles and user demographic, spell out any visual references you might have made within your illustrations. This is a really cool YouTube video. We won't watch it now because it's kind of long, but it's basically, I think, an example of storytelling within design and how to present your work. And so this guy goes through like 2 different versions of how he would present his work. The first one is like pretty boring, really straightforward. And then the second one, he kind of switches gears, explains the same exact brand, but the way he explains it makes it a lot more captivating. And I think he does a really good job of kind of showing how you would want to present your designs. Like that's your goal, like to be at that level. And yeah, so just really sell your presentation by showing the brand in different mediums, and that just means different assets. So like when I was showing you my socially distanced pals concept, I made sure to mock it up on like coffee beans, ice cream, soap, just to really sell the idea, send the message home, like everyone's getting their own stuff. And Brian is going to take it away with the assets deep dive.
Yep. Yeah, so more or less, we're just going to go through a bunch of examples of potential asset so you can consider to portray your brand. Yeah. So first and foremost is print, and then specifically we're talking about posters. So here's an idea for a poster for PM. Really vivid photography and bold colors. And as Katrina stated, like intentionality is very important in these panel deliverables, and like how the background matches the poster colors. Like that's something they thought about. So it's important to think about how even the background of these posters are being considered in your design. Here are other examples, and I believe these are all mock-ups that people have used, like a personal portfolio, maybe another brand identity. Then there's like poster mock-up with like texturing, business cards, and more posters. And these are all mock-ups that you guys can find and use in your own projects. Another one for mock-up for posters, like a grunge wall. And then next, aside from posters, stickers are, I think it's one of my favorite ways to sort of mock up a design because it's fun, it's cute. There's very good mock-ups, like this is a mock-up I use, but it's very, very realistic. And you can also print them if you want, and they're not that expensive. It's like a memento. Yeah, other print, these are printing on, this is more stickers. This is maybe like a ticket. Yeah, there's more ideas to how to incorporate stickers into your asset library. The next, which is going off of printing, but this is packaging. So a lot of people's brand, or most people's brands, I think I would say revolve around a product, and if not a product, then a service. And how you portray your products and its packaging is very important. You can tell sort of the different aesthetic or mood that these brands are going for. And these are also all mock-ups that you can find online to use. For examples with the milk carton, wine bottle, chocolate, then like bath products. Yeah. And then third, this is maybe, never mind, I won't say that. It is relevant to the course right now, and you can find mockups, but it's harder to, but it's hard to find mockups for environmental ones, but it's very important to think about holistically how you portray your brand, especially if it has a physical location like a store, and you can see how they use numbers, like strong graphics on the walls to create some sort of identity. Clever how they do sort of the elevator entrance on each level. Then this is a play on their logo and the handle, where the handle is part of the logo. It comes out. I think it's very clever. There's also another, like, think about how you want to aesthetically portray your brand in the even in the physical locations. These three squares are glowing with like minimalistic black lines. And then here is just a company that does the environment. Well, they do branding very well in general, but they do environmental branding extremely well. I'm sure everyone knows what this is without any logos. You just sort of, if you want to put in chat, I can't see the chat, but I will assume everyone knows what brand this is. And it's Apple, of course, but they spent a lot of money on the architecture and environmental design of their stores, and they always have this white diffuse light. They always have these thick wood tables. They always have reflective everything. This glass staircase they spent $1 million on. Exactly, it was on the news and they built it. But yeah, think about how environment impacts how your design is portrayed. And here's another one by Louis Vuitton, where um, they're collabing with Kusama, the fine artist with the dots. And then here are just more high-end luxury clothing brands and how they display their products in physical locations. Here, how the light is mapped onto the walls and the different objects. I think this is Hermes, maybe. And then other examples with like shoes, how there's a paint bucket, and yeah, just examples to think about when when presenting your work, there's a plethora of opportunity. The next, the physical products, what goes inside your packaging and you sell at your stores. Here's a clever example for olive oil. They're shaped like olives. More minimalistic tech brands like Logitech and Sony, how their logo reflects on their products. There's another one for face cream, and then there's lipstick, I want to say, like Jacobs. And then again, how the background plays into framing your product. It's very important to think about, like the pink and the watermelon. Then tote bags are another great way to mock up your logos or small graphics. There's a lot of mock-ups you can find online, and they're also pretty cheap if you want to make it into a reality. Yeah. And then Ella, do you take over from here, right?
Sorry, I thought I started at advertorial.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so next, apparel and merch. And there's also a lot of mock-ups for these. Yeah. This is a brand, Barbell Brigade. They're obviously like a gym sporty brand. And they just map their logo and graphics onto almost everything, like slippers, socks, hats, like protein powder. Then here's more examples of mocked up assets of apparel, and this is literally a mock-up that you can use with a knockoff Nike logo. Yeah. And then just more examples of mock-ups. And this is like mock-ups of apparel and other assets for a coffee shop. And then one company that does a lot of apparel is Disney. And they have also have expansive environmental sort of performance in their stores, but just everything is coated in Disney to a grotesque extent at some points. But yeah, you can make long tees, graphic tees, phone cases, watches. This is a bag. Like the possibilities are endless for what products you want to use. Obviously, choose the ones that are best for your brand or that best represents your brand. And yeah. The next is advertorial.
Cool. I'll screen share. Sorry, I'm having an issue. Okay. Okay, so advertorial, within this you could do billboards. And there's some great tips for kind of billboard creation out there. And a couple are like, keep it simple. Like there's one rule that's like 7 words or under. And that simply has to do with the fact that it's like movement. You read billboards on the go. So that's something to keep in mind. And then contrast and like kind of bold font works really well too. So these examples have like great kind of color contrast. And then always like try to get your logo wherever you can. I think bottom right corner is kind of standard practice. And here are some more examples. Spotify again, and think about maybe shapes and kind of bold shapes. And so they've got their dot here as it is Spotify. So that's kind of clever. And then here are a couple more. These are just different mock-ups you can use. So yeah, there's like virtual billboards now, and like bus stop billboards. So think about those sorts of dimensions if you're leaning towards doing something like that. And also this is a great opportunity to think about who your consumer is. Are they somebody who would take the train? Are they somebody who would take the freeway to work? Things like that. And here's another company. This is Zendesk. So this is a SF customer service software company. And here they have like really cohesive illustrations that really quickly communicate what they do. So they've got this like handshake illustration here, and then they've got a microphone and a little mail letter thing, and so that kind of alludes to their customer service and kind of speech aspect of the business. And then this is a really clever L'Oreal ad, and this here it's kind of hard to see, but these are statistics of what hiring women has done for the company, and like how it's increased profitability. And so they've created this great contrast where they have the super bold font and it's white against red, so they have the color contrast as well. And then they've got so like that's really kind of appealing to kind of masculine audiences, these like really bold, engaging captions. I mean, to be honest, that's engaging for anybody. But then they contrast that with this really like feminine imagery. So there's a lot of different ways to create contrast in poster design. And then social media assets. So you can have like assets for Instagram, and those are typically square. So think about how that'll adjust your composition, whether you're going to have horizontal images or fit that square. And then also think about text, because when people are going through like Instagram stories, it goes really, really quick. So you want really short kind of phrases, and then really either bold or caps. But that also depends on how bold your brand is. So yeah, definitely keep in mind quick communication with type. And then you can also, if you want to play with like an Instagram mockup, you can always go in and like kind of collage your images together, and that way you can see how cohesive they look. And then just kind of like sprinkle little, like see this right example has this like line work that makes it really cohesive. So there are really simple ways to add that sort of pattern into your brand. And then you can also consider what type of stickers you would use if your brand will rely heavily on social media, or you can have like more playful ones or more bold ones. And maybe think about how they're being used, because if they're really commonly used, then maybe it won't be as effective in distinguishing your brand. And there's also these little animations that you can check out and think about. You can even make animations. I think Procreate is a decent program for that. And there's a lot of great tutorials out there. And then here's another like kind of app design. So this is for like mobile use. And I think this one's nice because it has really great contrast. And then also this like last image is uploading. And I think that's really clever to have an illustration there, just because when people are waiting, like their minds aren't occupied. So it's a great time to engage with customers. So if you do have a very like web-based solution or brand, that might be a great page to design or to think about. And again, more animation. I think this is like really exciting and helpful for like a cover page on a website. So if you do have the means to do an animation, I highly recommend it. I just think it's super engaging and really fun. And then this is a company called Snap Sound, and it's a sound studio for independent filmmakers. And I think they do a good job at appealing to, individual artists through this kind of handmade aesthetic and this kind of collage imagery. So definitely think about how you're going to get the different aspects of your brand into things, and what your kind of patterns say about your brand. And then this is kind of just good example for composition, how to kind of lay out your website and how to put your main image in there. And here's another from the same. And then this is Veeps, and this is a live music site, and they do something really interesting by taking the locations of the live music and doing these like really minimalistic motifs or architectural designs or photography and incorporating that in their website. And they also have this really nice layout that's just super unique with like having the square on one side and having the drop down. So those are definitely things to think about. And yeah. Oh, and this is for food. This is like a kind of, if your brand is like food oriented, I think this is a really great example. And you can see like they obviously have like a great understanding of kind of color theory because they have the red and the orange, which is like, again, like the hunger inducing colors. And then they have this purple, which kind of touches upon like culinary arts and creativity. And I think when you're creating mock-ups and assets for food, it's a great idea to think about photography and illustration. I think this is a really great way to engage. Oftentimes, food photography can be really difficult if you're not experienced with it and you are with illustration. Then you might want to lean more heavily on that or on icons. And maybe pull from things like DoorDash or other types of sites that you imagine would host your menu if you're not going to host it yourself. And then this is, think about the dimensions. So would you have it on a tablet? Would you have it on a phone? And then matching your mock-up backgrounds again to the material you have within is always really just makes your mock-ups look really nice. And then these like take your time looking for your mock-ups. There's a lot of cool ones out there. I like these like pop-up ones. They definitely make you feel involved and like engaged in the product. So that might be helpful for your brand. And here's another one. Though I would also be careful to make sure you have like a good angle or that you have multiple angles so that you can really show what's going on, because this angle kind of limits certain things. But anyway, so it might be helpful to have multiple mockups and multiple angles. And then there are also mockups that have like hands in them, or this one's for like credit cards. So you might want to think if you have like a shopping aspect. And then there are like mockups with like hands. I don't particularly like this one just because, I don't know, the hands look animated or altered or something. So definitely attention to that detail and how that detail represents your brand is important when you're choosing mockups for your assets. All right, now I'm going to pass it on to Jacob.
Yep. So we're going to be going a bit more in depth into one, I guess like a possible asset that you might make. So that's why we're giving like a mini lecture on that, UI UX design. So this is a branding design class, so a lot of the concepts will be a bit more preliminary, and tied more about branding. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions if you have any. So if you're unsure if you might hear like these buzzwords like UI, UX, product, things like that. So if you don't know, user interface or UI is the graphical design of a digital screen. UX is or user experience is the experience of how they interact with the graphical elements, or defining what the experience of the experience for the user using an app or a certain like product. And then product design, I didn't put it here, but it's essentially what I think it is like encompassing of UX, UI, and like business thinking. So how does your product work in the real world? So yeah, in terms of like deliverables, UI is mainly focused on typography, like basically branding, color, illustration, grids, buttons, assets, patterns, so on and so forth. And UX is more a typical deliverable might be a layout, usability, like making sure that the interface is usable, the experience is meant for is also accessible user flows. So thinking about how a certain page or certain action leads to another, what that experience looks like. Wireframes, so low foot, like these are like sketches of what a screen might look like, and then copywriting. So copywriting is more on UX because you're interacting with the text will tell you what to do. So you have to consider it as part of the experience. So here's just I guess a progression in terms of fidelity and like where UX versus UI falls into play. So UX is more and a bit of UI is more in the front, like the front half, and then the rest is like polishing your UI up. Here's just like another GIF of like I found a nice GIF of like the wireframe, what the wireframe looked like, and what the like high fidelity mockup looks like. So how does branding relate to UI design? So if you really think about it, your UI is just an extension of your brand. It's like for example, website or app is just an extension. It's just an asset that you might make of your brand. It might be your main service, but it has to still follow your brand guidelines and your brand system or your brand guidelines. So within like if you're really into UX, there's something called design systems where it's an application of your branding and in a more like with an app first mentality. So a design system includes things like and from a brand like its icons, its layout, the colors and shapes. But oh sorry. Wait. But a design system, what is different about a design system compared to a branding, like brand guidelines, is that a design system is or are the single source of truth. They allow teams to design, develop, and realize a product. So, and in comparison to brand guidelines, guidelines are a set of rules that explain how a brand works, while system is a collection of defined components that people can reuse and combine. So within this like DeCal, we mainly teach you like the brand identity, and that'll be basically a small component of the design system to inform what all the things will look like, and then the design system will inform how to use those elements and actually give you the elements to use. So, and design systems are most commonly found for like product or like app-based digital companies, as not all companies would require such an extensive library of like guidelines for making visual assets. So a component of a design system, so like similar to like what we've done in this DeCal, you have a purpose and shared value. So what is like the main purpose of this like design system? What's the thing underpinning all your designs? What's the is it centered on collaboration? Is it centered on transparency? Is it centered on authority? Things like that. Design principles, so specifically related to design, what may experience look like? What values do you want to show in your print when you're designing? And then thirdly, the brand identity and language, so this entire decal, and then the actual components and patterns. So the realization of the brand identity in a usable form that people can reuse often again and again. So looking at IBM's design system, their one is called Carbon. So on the left is their purpose. So for them, their design system is to like, it's how they build bonds. And then they have this thing stand for equals stand out, meaning like if by standing with the users, they stand out of the crowd, and then think to guide, essentially, and rather than thinking about like try to always guide the users rather than let them think on their own. And then the right ones are the design principles, carefully considered, uniquely unified, expertly executed, positively progressive. They're all, what do you call it? Alliterations for some reason. But yeah, those are like the principles that they align their design to. And then some of their brand guidelines. So they have, like, this is just for the typeface. They have different guidelines for typeface, color, and like how to use it. And then the components are based on those guidelines. So these are components of their like their website or their UI. For example, like the button, what a button should look like, because a button could look like anything, could be rounded, could be centered, could be like thick font, things like that. And then the right is like the actual typefaces that they provide. And this is all free. Like we all can use, even like take items from their brand system to make something that looks like it's from IBM. So I'm just going to give you a few resources of different design systems that are out there that are free to use. The most common and really extensive one is the Google one, Google Material Design. So this is what all the Android phones look like if you use Android. Yeah, so you can, this is like, I guess, the standard for design systems. It's very comprehensive. It's very interactive. Like you can like change the colors and then download the file directly to use it yourself. Apple has a design system. If you're very familiar with it, you'll see it. Their font is like SF Pro, I think, as like San Francisco, and they have a really minimalistic aesthetic. Airbnb, I think theirs called Serial, or I know their font is called Serial, but here their design system, it's more like they use gradients compared to Apple's like all like monochromatic. They focus on like clean, very like red, very prominent red versus green, and like that travel theme. Uber, their one is called Base. Their one is like very, in comparison to like Airbnb, where they use rounded borders, even the buttons were like rounded a bit. Uber mainly had like clean, crisp edges, and like monochromatic. If you think about Lyft, they're all rounded, pink. Like there's still a very obvious difference between the two. So you can, within a design system, you can also think about whether you might not make one, but they could be very strict. So either like the guidelines are very, strict or loose or up to interpretation. They could be very modular. So all their patterns might be they're reusable versus integrated, meaning they only give like one example and it's up to you to figure out how to make something out of it. They could be centralized versus distributed. So centralized, only one team is in charge of design system, versus distributed, everyone's in charge. Everyone contributes to the system in some way. So some inspiration for UI or just like design systems, this beautiful page, uijar.com, gives like really pretty inspiration on like just website UI, I think. And if you want like more resources on design systems in general, you can go to designsystems.com. It's by Figma, I think. And also, if you are building UI, you should consider like with your brand, you should consider who are using it for, who's going to use your website, what would they use it for, what content should be most prominent, how will you transfer your brand into it? Is it using images? Is it using illustrations? How many screens will I show? So as the homework today is to make one asset from one of these we provided you or other ones. Think about like how many screens should I show to maximize, like show my concept. And please look at existing apps for fuel. On Figma, I can show you some examples, but like you can either use like the design systems that you've seen, like they're free to use, literally just take it and maybe like change the colors or like adapt it to your own brand, or like use existing, like you can download existing like UI files that give you literally everything, so you don't have to make it yourself. Some more resources. So if you want to learn more about UI UX or just like the process behind it, you can take the web design decal, the human-centered design decal, the graphic design principles decal, or now the Figma decal. As you can see, Berkeley only has decals. The design education is run on decals, surprisingly. Or apply to different clubs, and then here's just some like links for different like principles on UI UX, because that can be entire decal on its own. I just gave you a very, very small taste on what it could be. I'm trying to make a minor. I have a proposal, but we shall see.
You can propose minors?
That's
That's
what they did.
crazy.
That's what they did for the data one.
Wow.
But yeah, hopefully within the time that some of you are here in. Definitely
Wow.
not in my timeline. Or not in like our timeline. But yeah. So we have a lot of time left. So we're gonna make you guys do a design competition using a mock-up. So no, plus so yeah, we'll be doing a mock-up exercise. So just to give you more practice of using mock-ups, either from like if you remember from the demo, we gave you several different ways to make mock-ups, either on like using Photoshop or Figma. Essentially, all you'll be doing is for Purple Cow, bringing back the brand. You'll be working in pairs. We'll be randomly assigning you. Please don't leave. This is this is, I guess. Oh, I won't say it, but yeah, basically just choose one of the items that we share with you, and then include like an illustration, icon, or copy, and then just submit a mockup. So we're gonna put it on your breakout rooms randomly, and then just submit it to big D asset. I'm gonna put the thing here. Let me just make breakout rooms. And I think Brian, you can like start recording.
Okay.